Up with your rubbish. No, so it doesn't look so bad.
Put it off me biscuit.
Oh, a bit soft.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've just realised the camera 40 ones. So they're old ones.
They're in date.
Minute that, please.
Yeah.
Audit risk. Quality.
Yeah. I make it 2 o'clock on here.
It's 2, yeah, I think that one's slow. But they both look slow, don't they?
Yeah.
But it says 2 on my laptop.
We'll make a start. So whenever you're ready, we can give us a nod when we're on. Great stuff. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for being here, and those who are watching on stream. This is the Audit Committee for West Devon on the 5th of July 2022. Thank you. Failed the first hurdle. This is the Audit Committee for West Devon, 5th of July 2022. I'm Chairman, Councillor Kevin Ball, Vice Chairman, Councillor Mike Davies. I've got a couple of things to say in a moment, but we'll just start on the agenda. If I just scroll down on my screen. There we go. Apologies for absence.
We have no apologies, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, item 2, declarations of interest. Just reminded that in accordance with the Code of Conduct, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, including the nature and extent of such interests that they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. And it can be done during the meeting, during, if you see something pop up and you think I need to make a declaration, please do that by just notifying. Thank you. Items requiring urgent attention. We don't have any items requiring urgent attention as such, but there's a couple of things I did want to do. As you know, for the past 7 years, Councillor Davies has been chairman of the Audit Committee, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to put on record my thanks to him for his chairmanship, if I can say that, and the way he facilitated questions and opportunities for people to speak, and I think it's worth noting that. So, and the second thing I wanted to do, this is Dominic's last meeting with us. He'll explain a little bit more in due course. He's staying with Audit Partnership but doing other things, and we will be joined today online by Dom's replacement, Paul. Paul Middlemass, so we'll give an opportunity to say hello in a moment. But I just want to take the opportunity of thanking you, Dom. You've been around a little while now and become a sort of regular fixture of audit meetings here at West Devon. And I just want to give just pass the opportunity to Mike, because obviously Mike was chair for the past 7 years. Did you want to say anything particular?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, Dom, just want to thank you for your diligence and looking after us for many years, and the quality of your reports. You can always tell how good a report is by the lack of questions. I know you've had questions and some difficult questions over the years, but the reports have been excellent. We do wish you, I know you're staying with the Audit Partnership as the chairman just said, but we do wish you the best. In my time, you've managed to grow a beard. Yeah. But I take it now that I'm not the chairman. Dominic's not the West Devon internal team. I can actually park in his drive to watch the. He lives the closest. He's a person. He lives the closest to home park that I know. And it's difficult to park these days with capacity crowds every week. So I may be getting in touch with you about that. Anyway, all of that.
Is that declaring an interest.
I don't charge, so.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think it's important to recognise folk who've done a great job for us, and we wanted to do that, Dom. So, and just final thing on that, just want to welcome Councillor Samuel to the committee on its first meeting today. So, welcome. Okay, so that's that then. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. I'm assuming that people have had the opportunity to have a quick look through. I'll just quickly go through page by page, make sure that people are happy. Page 1, shout out if there's anything. Page 2 and page 3. Everyone happy? Could I have a proposer that we accept?
I'm happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Seconder, Councillor Yelland. Thank you very much. I just had to see your hand first. I'll just quickly sign that. Good. To you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. And we're on to item 5, and I want to welcome Oliver to us. Perhaps in a moment, Oliver, before you give a presentation, you could give your little bit about yourself and then your presentation. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my name is Oliver Devon. I'm an employee of Grant Thornton. I'm the external audit manager for the Borough Council. Jackson Murray, who's the director, can be here today, so I'll be presenting the audit plan. And then we have 2 reports, which I suppose are more for the noting. I'll come on to those in due course. So if I start on page 5 of the pack, the front page of our audit plan. The first thing I want to highlight here is to say this is dated March 2022, which is the aimed date for submitting an audit plan, so prior to the year end. The reason that we didn't bring it to the March 2022 committee was because of a slip for consultation on infrastructure assets, which are summarised on the key matters page, which is on page 7 of your packs. So the consultation was around treatment nationally in all councils of infrastructure assets being focused on the de-recognition of previous expenditure where there's new expenditure. So there have been some material issues at other councils, and it meant there was a delay in issuing this plan. Infrastructure assets are only slightly above material at West Devon, so I'm not expecting it to cause a major issue on this audit, but it still meant that we weren't able to bring this in March, which is why I'm talking through it today. So on page 8 of the pack, we have the headlines, which neatly summarise the significant risks and then some of the other areas in this report. The significant risk areas are what should be familiar to you from the previous plans. They're essentially all mandated. So management override controls, that fee consists on every single audit across the country. It's, as I say, a mandated risk that management are in a unique position to manipulate the accounts if they wish. So we consider journal entries and accounting estimates, which I'll talk about more in a moment. And then the other items, the valuation of land and buildings, investment property, and the pension fund net liability, they're on there because of their size. So they're so significant in their size that there is a risk of material misstatement in those areas. And then, as I say, the other areas in this headlines just talk a little around the materiality that we've selected or determined with this year's audit, the value funding arrangements, and then the logistics, which I'll speak about shortly. So we start to give more detail on the significant risks on page 9 of the pack. Funny enough, they start with 2 risks that we've been able to rebut because they're based on commercial entities. So the ISAs, the International Standards Audit, they say we have to consider these as risks, but due to the nature of the council, they're not actually significant here. So we were able to rebut these risks. So I'm going to move quickly on to page 10. So we start to talk around the risks that are relevant to West Devon. As I say, the management overriding controls. So we've laid out here our response to that risk, which is to assess the controls around the general control environment, as well as what testing we'll do on journals, and also the consideration we'll have of estimates. I think the third report that we're bringing to you today is the Informing the Audit Risk Assessment document, which is actually part of our response to this risk. It's around understanding what judgments management have made and making sure that you're comfortable with those judgments. If I talk around the valuation of land and buildings, investment properties, and pension fund net liability together, I know there might be specific questions on those and happy to take them afterwards. But essentially, our response on all of these is similar, which is that they are so judgmental, I suppose, so significant that management will use an expert to calculate what that figure should be at year end. And then our job as auditors is to understand the methodologies that expert has used, understand their competence and their qualifications, and then assess whether or not those judgments are reasonable. And that will be consistent. So whether it's PPE or pensions, the approach will be fairly similar. We'll understand who's made that estimate, how they've done it, and whether or not we consider that to be reasonable. So that's our responses to the significant risks. Pages 12 to, I think, 15 talk a little about the accounting estimates that we're considering. I suppose this ties back to that management override of controls. So one way management might override controls is to override the journal system and post an errant journal. Another way would be to make if you like, an aggressive estimate or a very prudent estimate that isn't realistic. So we change figures that way. So we consider those estimates and whether or not they're reasonable. So we've included a section here on what those estimates are that we'll consider. Other matters page just talks around our deliverables. There's some detail on page 16 around materiality and how we've determined that. So it's based on gross revenue expenditure, which we consider to be the key figure for users of the financial statements, residents of the area. Page 17, we talk about the audit strategy. So this is a new area of the plan this year because IT becomes so integral to what we do. We've actually decided to bring it into the plans to say that we do consider the IT control environment. So as well as testing the journals environment that the finance team might use, we also consider the controls that are across the entire entity around who can access the IT systems. So there's a little explanation around that work on page 17. Page 18, we explained that, as expected, we haven't found at this stage any indications of significant weakness in value for money, and that value for money work will be completed alongside the financial audit work by my colleague Dan Bobby. Sorry, actually, by my colleague Jeanette. I think she completed the work last year as well. Just take a little bit of time on the page 19, which is our audit logistics, because in the time between submitting this plan and being here today, we've had some movement. So you'll note that Jackson's listed, I'm listed here, but we're missing a colleague for the in-charge role, which we had last year, which is completed by a colleague, Michael Katie. She's leaving Grant Thornton, so she's been replaced. We now have a person in that role called Ben. Because of Katie leaving, you'll note towards the right of this page that we had TBC or to be confirmed as to when we were hoping to present our audit findings report. With Ben stepping into place, I'm happy to confirm that the audit will be starting next week, and that we're expecting to be able to bring the findings report on our initial timetable, which would be towards the end of September. I will just pause here as well to talk about the interim progress report, because there's a dot here saying June 2022, discuss interim progress. I just wanted to say that at this stage in March, we were able to review the work of internal audit today. We obtained an understanding of the estimates and controls that are around the entity, and we'll discuss again in the informing the audit risk assessment document shortly. We did perform the review of the IT control environment, and we walked through the areas of significant risk, so the journals environment, the pensions, and the property valuations areas. I'm happy to say that we don't have any material issues or weaknesses to report at this stage based on that assessment, and then we'll complete our substantive testing from next week with the final financial statements. Okay. On page 20 and 21, there's a summary of the audit fees. I know there'll be questions on these, and I think in some cases I'll have to refer those to Jackson, my director, but I'm happy to take the questions today, and we'll talk through what I can. And I'm happy to escalate anything up to him as required. I think just at this point, I will say that we put in a line here for remote working potential additional fee. This is only potential if we are expected to complete the audit entirely remotely, which I know that Pauline Henstock and I are discussing going forward to see if there's a way that we can work in a hybrid manner to make sure that we don't have that fee. And then our final pages are just on confirming our independence. So I pause there, Chair. I won't talk about the next documents. Maybe we'll pause there for any questions at this point. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Oliver. That's great. I mean, I've got a number of questions written down. I'm sure the Vice Chair has. Has anybody got anything that they want to ask? Go on, Vice Chair, you go first then.
Actually, I haven't got too many this time. So, I was just thinking, you listed 4 risks, which are always the same 4 risks, as they are for any council. I was just thinking, going through those, I mean, there's a lot of strike action taking place at the moment, certainly within the public sector. Should we as a council, be concerned about if we suddenly get across the board 4% pay rise or something pushed upon us? That will have a knock-on effect on pensions and everything else. Should that be something we should be concerned about at this stage or not?
I assume the short answer to that is no at this stage, particularly from an external audit perspective. Our focus will be on whether or not the figures in this year's accounts are correct. I suppose you're right with the pensions potential going forward. It's a good point around inflation, and we do consider that. So we'll take data that's as up to date as it can be on the day of the audit being signed. So if there was a change in the figures used in the methodologies by the experts, either evaluating properties or pensions at the 31st of March, and something changed by September, that would be considered by us, but also not just at West Devon, across every council, and that there would be a sort of nationwide solution to whatever that would be. So I don't think it would be an adjusting event, for example. So I don't think it would change the figures in this year's accounts.
The other one, actually, I think you sort of will probably answer in the next section, but you do actually mention about this specifically. This is on our page 12. Specifically, do audit committee members, list 3 things, understand the characteristics and methods? And but basically, what I'm looking at is actually, do audit committee members understand sort of what we're supposed to be understanding? Do you, as external auditors, do you review the questions we ask, or do you think it's very interesting that all these different councils that we represent always ask the same questions, but West Devon have never asked questions on that subject? There may be a weakness. Do you sort of liaise with the Section 151 officer and say, I think your council may be short, your council may be short on training in a certain area? And I know a lot of that's going to come up because we've got a whole list of questions on the next section, but it's actually in a way answered that. But I just wondered, when we meet as an audit committee, you sort of review the standard of our committee. It's not going to be a weakness. We'd never ask you any questions, external auditors or internal auditors. So do you look at that, and do you actually come back and say at some stage to Lisa that actually I think your councillors could do training in a certain area?
I think it's a good point. We do actually consider it in the value for money assessment. So that's broken down into the financial sustainability, governance, and 3E's economy, efficiency, and effectiveness areas. In that governance section, there is a response to how we think the council is organised, and those types of governments are organised in a way that they challenge management. And we would respond in that area around whether there is sufficient challenge from the audit committee, in this venue, and also we attend the committees and we review the minutes. So we do that work. But I guess there's I think the phrasing negative. Sure, we wouldn't go back to Lisa and say we confirm that we're satisfied with the audit committee. I think if we thought there was an issue, exactly, report by exception. Yes, would be the way we do phrase that. But it is something we do consider. And you're right to point out that the next document is really for all of you to use when you're looking at the accounts, possible ideas or questions to ask.
Thank you, Oliver. I've got some questions if anyone else is indicating at the moment. Just go back to page 10, management override controls. We talked about that when Jackson was here last time. It's obviously related to changes that we're doing, and we talked about this previously. Perhaps Lisa, you wanted to perhaps give us an update on this, because there has been movement since the last audit committee, and it was something we had quite a long discussion about last time.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so this is something that a member of Mrs. Henstock's team have worked on, and this is about downloading all of the into a report, all of the financial transactions which have happened within a financial year. And in the past, it has required a member of Mrs. Henstock's team to download that information manually and spend quite a lot of time on pulling that information together for the auditors. And the auditors advised us that other councils that also use Civica Financials, which is the finance system that we use, were able to do that in a much more automated manner rather than having to spend staff time on it. That's something that Mrs. Henstock and her team have progressed for this financial year. We're nearly at the point where we've got that information, because Grant Thornton are coming in next Monday to start the audit of the accounts. So we've got that information ready. It's not quite automated. We are still having to spend an amount of staff time on it. I don't know if there's anything Mrs. Henstock would like to add to that. I think it's less time that we've spent in the past, but not quite fully automated yet. But we're working on it.
Thank you, Lisa. Pauline, did you want to jump in with anything there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say that we have been spending a lot of time on it to try and get it a lot more automated, because obviously that's of great benefit to the auditors, but also to ourselves in future years. So we are making progress, and I'm quite confident we will have the reports ready for the audit, and there will be very little, if any, manipulation. So good news, hopefully.
Thank you, Pauline. It is good news. So we did talk about that for the some while last time. So thank you for that update. And obviously that's significant as one of the areas that the auditors are focusing on. The next one, of course, is on page 11, which relates to investment properties, which of course is an ongoing thing. And obviously, post-COVID, there has been some positivity in the market, although things are a bit in state of flux at the moment with fuel and everything. A quick question for yourself: is that something that do you have any concerns about that initially with the backdrop of, I suppose it's a bit similar to the question that the Vice Chair asked, in the uncertainty of different things going on in the background?
Yeah, I suppose it's whether or not the expert valuer, so there is an expert valuer using this, they have the option to in their report say whether or not they consider there to be material uncertainty in their valuation. And if they don't, I think obviously if anyone reading the news at the moment, you would take some skepticism when you're completing that work, but we have to accept that as of the date that we're auditing, the information is correct. So
okay. So it's a definite maybe then. Thank you. Page 17, which links back to my previous question relating to the reports and IT, but I think we're moving things along with IT and reporting anyway. We've got the hub member here, Chris Edmunds. Chris, did you want to just have a little bit of an input that I know we had a conversation earlier on about this, and I think a couple of things you said might be useful in relation to where we're up to with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
Microphone, Chris.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that's a point that was raised in Mr. Mosher's internal audit report, and around the the quality of the management information that is reported, and trying to eliminate any manual involvement in that. And we are moving with our software system, Liberty Create. So, before too long, we will be interrogating that system and downloading, management information without having to have any manual input at all. We're not quite there yet, but the system is there. It's operational. We just need now to move to that point. So yeah, and we are of course reporting performance to ONS and how that is now being done on a regular basis. But it's just that background information that still requires some manual input, but that will, as I say, disappear in a fairly short period of time as we move more into Liberty Create.
Thank you, Councillor Edmunds. I'll come to your question in a second. I was just going to say that that does cross over to Dominic's report in a little while. So as some of these things are in the external audit, are obviously inevitably going to be in the internal audit as well. Councillor Simon.
Yeah, so I'm a bit new to this. So just following on from that, how much time take to manually do it?
I think in the past it's been a couple of weeks of staff time. Yeah.
Significant.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
Thank you. Then I suppose the question that we all wanted to do, or the topic we all want to discuss, is the fees. I'm a little surprised that Councillor Ridges hasn't jumped in by, because he normally does. but I'll bring it up. And
In these inflationary times, I didn't think Mr. Thorne
yeah,
say it.
well, if you include the 5K, it's
Obviously we've had. Sorry.
no.
We can talk about that, and Pauline and saying trying to mitigate that. So yes, that's why I haven't got a lot of comment on it really.
Sorry to interrupt you in it.
Thank you.
No, well, I just wanted to bring it up because if you look at it on face value, it's potentially a 15-17% increase, which is obviously a substantial increase. You've obviously mentioned about the 5,000 online, but that's not necessarily going to be something we will have to pay, depending on the usage. But and I think the Redmond report did indicate that we would have to pay more for our external auditing going forward anyway. Putting them on the spot a little bit, but I mean, did you want to make any comment about that? Because one thing that you have done on page 21 is lay out some of the the lines, which is helpful because you can see where some of it is going. But I do have a specific question around the 5K and how do we evaluate how we use that or not use that going forward? And obviously, Lisa, you can chip in as well on that one. But I'll pass to yourself first.
Thank you, Chair. So when you say evaluate, how you use that?
Well, my understanding from what you said a few minutes ago, that 5,000 is potential, depending on how much online auditing is done in comparison to face-to-face auditing. So how do we evaluate, do we have an hour sheet? If I'm working for somebody, I might have an hour sheet to work out exactly what's what. Because otherwise, how do we know how much we've used? Yeah.
I think what the auditing is hoping to do is not next week, but from the week following until completion or the concluding stages, to be able to be on site, whether the finance team is in West Devon or South Hams, be on site maybe 2 days a week with appropriate staff available on those days. But we're aware that staff obviously work remotely themselves often, so it's a case of not saying hard 15 hours a week, and then we're done. It's okay. Can we work together to make it run as efficient as possible with Southampton and West Devon science teams being flexible with us to help that delivery. The reason that the 5K has been put in by Grant Thornton across the country with their council audits is, although West Devon in some cases is a poor example because you met the audit deadline last year to sign off. Nationally, only 30% of councils did, and that's the theory is that there's been a big slowdown, and part of that is because of remote working. It's brilliant as it is in lots of ways. It has slowed teams down. It's created more time on job codes. You know, without wanting to get into boring conversations around recovery rates for the audit team, I think that's the reason it's been put in there. And then we're trying to work with the West Devon team to see how we can deal with it efficiently, which means we won't have to charge like 5K at the end of the process.
Sure. Thank you. That's helpful. We do have a bit of good news though. So did you want to talk about that, Lisa?
Chairman. So as you say, as part of the Redmond review, it was recognised that audit fees would have to increase, and the government actually put £15 million into the spending review, and to help councils with the increased cost of audit. And we've actually received a reimbursement of £15,600. So we have, that is only a one-off grant, but it's still £15,600 that we can put towards these audit fees. As you said, Mrs. Henstock and myself have had meetings with Grant Thornton's team. We are looking to adopt that sort of hybrid approach to working, that some of the time we'll be on site, some of the time it will be off site. I do get the point that it is more difficult to do some of the auditing when, you know, for example, you need to sit together, look at the ledger, go through complex calculations as to why figures are what they are. And it is much easier to do that if you're sat beside somebody rather than trying to do that over Teams and then, you know, have the ledger up on one screen and look at a spreadsheet on another screen. So I do get the point that it is harder, but also the converse argument is you're not spending time travelling. The team wouldn't have overnight costs or accommodation costs, so it is a balance, I think. And the same from our team as well. You know, if they're working from home, that they've got more time that they can spend in a working day on actually, you know, getting the audit queries back to Grant Thornton in a timely manner. Whereas if they're travelling into the office and then going home, that is taking time out of the day. So it's a balance, and I'm sure we'll make it work.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I think it's good news that, you know, we've got some help this year anyway. Before we move on to the next section, I think we just note that, don't we? Has anybody else got any questions on that first report before we move on? Councillor Samuel.
Sorry, not questions, but, you know, just to note that you said they were done, is it 30% of councils? That's really impressive. So just want to congratulate the finance team for getting that done in time.
Yes, we've done that previously, haven't we?
Well, to say we have an impressive team.
We do.
You'll learn that.
Yeah, without doubt. Okay, well, happy to know, members. Thank you. Oliver, I'll hand back to you then for your second report.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to scroll, I think it's on page 25, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the purpose of this report is, as I say, some guidance for members. Once you receive the financial statements, we're hoping that you can use these questions if you're not familiar with financial statements to help you with some ideas around areas of further questions or challenge that you might want to raise. And if you can understand the points in these questions, I think you could say that you understand the accounts pretty well. I don't have anything specific to go through, so I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean there are some questions that you need to adapt to make them fit our situation. Some of them are interesting wording. Where am I going? Oh, I've gone. That's on the next one. Has anybody got any comments or points they want to make on that? Yes, Councillor Richards. Could you put your mic on, please, Councillor Richards? No. It's the right hand button.
Is it on if it's green?
No, it should go to red.
It's starting.
There you go.
Slow to warm up, you could say. Right. Well, I think I can make myself heard. Just regarding journals, is that something you particularly look at the year end then, as you're looking at money has moved around and that's those monthly management accounts occur as normal and then figures aren't happening? Is that a particular time period it's all looked at, or?
Yeah, we refer to that as month 13, I suppose. These what we consider to be topside journals, any final adjustments, yeah, we would consider with particular scrutiny. I should say here, that's a good point to raise, page 30, because just reading this accounts in front of you, you wouldn't know what level of adjustments were made by manual journals. I guess that's just something for members to keep in mind. Discuss how the system is becoming more automated and purpose of that.
That would refer to the materiality point as well, would it then, if we're starting to see shifts in journal through manual journals above the materiality level, it's an item to take note.
Absolutely, and if we identified a manual journal that was over materiality, then you can guarantee that we identify that and consider whether or not that journal is reasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Any other questions or points? Councillor Young.
Just a comment really that I would imagine that the questions themselves would be answered in the report anyway as you are writing your report. So, well, it's brilliant, helpful to have the questions. I would kind of almost expect to see the answers incorporated into the report anyway.
Yeah, very good point. Anybody else? Oh, yes, Lisa.
Chairman, just to add on, add to the journal question as well. Yes, grant funders do carry out spot checks or sample checks on those journals, as do the internal audit team when they're looking at their. They would do a review of the financial system, so that would look at journal testing as well. And I know the senior accountants within Mrs. Henstock's team, they approve all journals, so they look at all journals over 25,000. So if a member of the team has put a journal on, if it's over 25,000 in value, it will get looked at and authorised by a senior accountant. So we don't have the level of staff resource to look at every single journal, which I think has been a point in the past audit about not all journals are reviewed, but the ones over 25,000 are, and that's a level that we set as being a reasonable level, that taking into account the amount of staff time to review those journals against and the benefit of reviewing journals at a certain level.
Thank you. I suppose it links back to the materiality point that Councillor Richards brought up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think this, imagine Grant Thornton have done this for everybody, but the airport, obviously tailor-made for each council. But I think it's excellent actually to have some kind of question that we should ask, because we can get ad hoc training now and again. Obviously, COVID slowed things down a bit, but coming in as a new councillor to the audit committee, so what questions am I supposed to ask? And we'll just sit here, just trying to dream something up, or is there a set thing that should be looking at? I think it's great to actually have it laid out. I think as Councillor Yellen said, obviously, if you put a question to us, then you would actually have the answer already it's done in your reports. But I think it's very, very good to do this, just for the sake of all of us. You go through it, and you think actually for every time we look at the accounts, we can actually we have this alongside us and we quickly whiz through it and think, actually, if I don't know the answer to it, then I can actually at least raise the question. As we all say, there's no such thing as a silly question, and sometimes you just sit there thinking, what am I actually talking about? But it's okay from someone with an auditing background, but then sometimes I sit on other committees and think, what are they talking about? So it's good to, I think, I just want to say it's excellent to have something like this.
Yeah.
Following through. So thank you.
Oliver, you wanted to come back?
I just want to say this is Mrs. Buckle requesting this for this committee, so thank Mrs. Buckle for bringing it.
We thank her for lots of things, don't we? Okay, thank you. I think that's another noting. Oh, sorry, Councillor Richards. You want to go again? There you go.
I've got mastered this.
Now you've gone off now.
All wins. Yes, I think it's in particular because we sort of turn over about 7.88 million, and where we have a property asset portfolio of 25. And that I've always had concerns in that area, and especially during COVID, the initial part of COVID, in terms of renters' defaults and property market crashes, and we probably actually are. Maybe gone the other way in this inflationary times. Actually, we're probably well set up for the future by having all these assets. But I think it's really good to raise these questions because we probably think we are a bit more vulnerable, with those holdings, that they're outside our turnover. They're probably 3 times our turnover. So no, I think it's good. It makes us question, think about all the, not just the workings of council here in Tavistock and all over the borough, but also the assets we own as well outside the borough. So,
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Okay, I think we're done on that. Members happy to note?
Yes.
Thank you. Oliver, page 47, I believe.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chair. This report is informing the audit risk assessment. As part of our planning procedures, we ask management certain questions around their understanding of their controls, their assessment of fraud risk. Just read out the contents really. Related parties, their attitude to going concern, their outstanding laws and regulations. As I say, that's to help us gain understanding, but we also like to take that to the committee so that those charged with governance can see those responses and make sure they're comfortable with those. So the purpose of this report is actually, again, I guess, just to flag with you that this is a response of management to our questions. That is it consistent with the view of those charged with governance, and therefore we can then take it to be a reasonable assessment of the entity. So I don't think I'll talk through, because again, I'll take it as read that these are on the contents, you have the areas that we've asked questions about.
Yeah.
On those pages, and subsequent pages, you can see the responses to management. And then if there are questions from the charged governments, they can have this opportunity to ask them.
Thank you, Oliver. I did have one question which related to housing benefit fraud, but I believe we're going to cover that on the internal audit. So I'll hold that question for that report. Has anybody got any other comments? I suppose it's similar. Yes, Councillor Richards, far away.
yeah, this relates to, I don't know if you're covering this as well, page 69. This is the council administers a significant amount of business grants on behalf of the government. Council also received other government grants this year. This is highly converted part of the council collection fund. In terms of responsibility, I've had a couple of questions from parishioners who were very worried in surrounding parish council meetings, the level of fraud in West Devon or across the country on these business grants and on these loans. Where does responsibility lie for audit? Is that a central government thing that will be passed down to us? Do we take any responsibility there? Probably not financial responsibility. We just had a sort of crisis issue dishing them out. But, it's just something that I just wanted to investigate a bit more. And, is it our responsibility? Have we got the team to do it? Are we going to get a grant to do it? Investigate the people we've given a grant to for their fraud. But and just further questions on it. How does the audit trail work on this? If there is one, and I would rather hope they are looking at potential fraud.
I think that's a great question, Councillor Richards. I think we can cover that in the internal audit report. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm happy whenever, yes.
Yes, yeah, I think it's a great question. Please come back when Dom does his report, because I think I have something similar written down as well, actually, so it's an important one. Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions related to this? I mean, I guess this is similar to the previous one, really. Bunch of really helpful questions. If not, happy to know, members. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it then for yourself, Oliver. Thank you very much for attending today, and give our regards to Jackson. I'm assuming that it'll be a double act next time, will it?
I expect so. If we're coming in September to bring our audit findings, it will likely be work with us.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, and well, hope you enjoyed your first meeting with us today. Okay, thank you. You're welcome to stay if you wish to do so. Yeah. Okay, so item 8. I'm then going to hand over to Councillor Edmunds, who's introducing this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As part of the internal audit reporting process, Audit Committee has been receiving updates on the progress made on last year's audit plan. Under the public sector internal audit standards, the head of internal audit is required to present an annual report that provides an opinion that can be used by the council to inform its annual governance statement. Today's report is that annual report, which summarises the work carried out by internal audit during 2021-22, reviews the performance of the internal audit service, and provides an audit opinion on the adequacy of internal control. Overall, and based on work performed during 2021-22, internal audit is able to provide reasonable assurance on the adequacy and effectiveness of the authority's internal control environment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edmunds. Dom, anything you want to add? But maybe you could take this opportunity to introduce Paul to us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Edmunds. As this is my last committee, I'm handing over responsibility for the running of the audit team to my colleague and fellow audit manager, Paul Middlemas, who's in on the meeting. I'll let Paul just give a quick introduction, I think, at this stage. Paul.
Yeah, please do, Paul.
Yep, so welcome to you all. So yes, Paul Middlemas. I've been in Devon Audit Partnership for the last 2 years, and I'm in essence, the head of audit for North Devon, Torridge and Mid Devon councils, and also doing work for Tinbridge as well. So I think one of the opportunities that we see for taking on West Devon South Hams into this portfolio really is to, I suppose, for us to identify good practice and communicate that across different councils. I'm also quite interested in business areas, understanding and awareness of risks that they're perhaps accepting, but and trying to make that clear to management. So yeah, so a couple of years I've spent in DAP. Before that, I spent many years in central government. I've worked in HM Revenue and Customs and BAYS and DCMS and Ministry of Defence. So in some respects, things are quite different. In many other respects, they are very much the same sort of controls and risks and so on. Now, obviously, Dom is leaving as sort of the head of audit management, but at the same time, he's staying on the DAP team. So I'll be continuing to rely on his advice and guidance. And also, of course, Julie and Matt continue to provide us of continuity in providing the audit activity and so on.
Thank you, Paul, and it's good to have you with us, and look forward to having you here in person next time.
Yeah.
Dominic.
Thank you, Chair. So if we turn attention to my annual report, as Councillor Evans pointed out, this is my annual report. Sets out the work that the internal audit team carried out between April 2021 and March 22, and on into this current audit year as we try to complete last year's plan. So it goes up until the the start of June. As I've been reporting during the year, COVID has impacted progress with one of the members of the team, that's Matt, continuing to assist with the processing of the various business grants during first lockdown and onwards. Once again, this left my other auditor, Julie, to pick up the majority of the planned audits. During the year, South Hams agreed to the provision of additional days by Devon Audit Partnership, and in the end, we provided 50 extra days to cover for Matt's absence. And this enabled a number of audits to be completed, or at least to commence. As it stands, 8 out of the 41 planned audits have been deferred or not started. This is reflected in the performance stats in the table on, I think, page 85 of the report of your papers, which, although shows improvement from the previous year, are still below targets. However, with Matt's return, I envisage that performance will further improve back up to target level. I would also like to note that we recorded just 1 day of sickness in the 12-month period up until the 31st of March, despite pandemics and everything else.
Very good.
Under the section of key findings, as in previous audit annual reports, I provide details of those audits where our audit opinion falls into one of the 2 lowest categories. For the 3rd year running, I'm pleased to say that we have no audits in the lowest category, that's low assurance. And just 4 audits undertaken last year came back with an audit opinion of limited assurance. In general, the direction of travel across all of those 4 audits is upward. Direction of travel is a term that we use to indicate whether progress is being made. And we were happy with the responses received from officers to our recommendations, which I think, if implemented, will certainly improve processes and controls. If I just go in and touch on each of those 4,
that would be helpful.
A little bit of detail.
Thank you.
We recognise that debtors have suffered from both a loss of knowledge and resources, in particular around debt recovery, as well as the pressures that the pandemic brought to the council and that debtors team. But once again, I think we've repeated a number of recommendations, but I think that, again, with the right resources and the right expertise and knowledge, especially around the side of the legals, etc., I think that certainly improvements certainly will be made. Moving on to council tax and business rates. Once again, this area has suffered from resource issues, but that's because the vast majority of the team were involved in working on the COVID business grants. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to internal audit, like many, recognise the market efforts that business grants team did, even though one of them was from my team. By supporting businesses and residents throughout the pandemic. The implementation of the actions, there's been a service review in this area of revenues and benefits, and I think it's pleasing to note that a number of the recommendations that we've made over, whether last year, the year before, appear in that service review's action plan. And so I think if that action plan, moves forward, then improvements will be made, and certainly things will improve, as well as with the appointment of a head of service. Yeah. Certainly we'll see improvements, and we're confident on that. Turning to estate management, there have been improvements under the estate management. We did a follow-up of a piece of work that we did, I think, almost pre-pandemic. And since then, we've had the appointment of the new head of assets. We've developed a really good working relationship with her. And I think that I'm confident that that progress and improvement will continue. Moving on to performance management, we kind of touched on it. With this area, once again, there's been improvement, but it's my old adage of an old tanker that some of these recommendations do take a long time to turn things around.
Yeah.
So it will take time to implement some of them, to complete some of them, bring some of them to fruition. With performance management, there's kind of 2 directions you can go. We go through the performance management door, and you can turn right and look at things like how you use the information that you've got, how you report it, how you act on it. What we chose to do in both the original audit and this follow-up was to turn left and look at actually how the quality of the data you collected, where it's been collected from, how you collected it. And we touched on this thing about manipulating, wrong word, but having to amend data. The perfect world, you would press a button on a computer and it would come up with all the information in the right format, all the columns looking nice, etc., and timely and accurate. Now, I'm under no illusion that we don't have that. I don't. So there will be a degree of, kind of having to change data to get into formats, etc. Keeping that to a minimum, it mitigates that risk of it being incorrect or error occurring. What is also important is there is an audit trail, so that somebody who looks at some information and says, okay, so how do we get that figure? They can look back and see where that figure came from, what amendments have been made to the original data to arrive at that figure. I think that's important, especially if somebody new comes along and, a person who did it last year has left and somebody's had to pick it up and they're scratching their heads as to how that figure was derived. Lastly, on performance management, a number of organisations that I've come across that are still churning out figures on historic KPIs that are no longer relevant. And therefore, I think it is important that the council regularly review the KPIs, just to say, if they're irrelevant, you've got officers spending some time trying to come up with the information, which actually isn't really necessary.
Sure.
So that's my take on those four topics that are covered under the key findings. Moving on, Appendix A is my usual kind of status chart, a table, which shows progress since the last progress report that was at the meeting in March. And we've continued to progress with the completion of some of the key financial system audits, which saw us issue 4 final reports and 1 report in draft. With regards to those final reports, our findings and responses from officers appear in Appendix B, as usual. I apologise that the usual description of what the ticks and the squares mean was missing off your report. Just to remind people that the ticks indicate where there's been a change of status since March's report, and the little squares mean it's just a repeat of the status as last, was reported in March. As far as the rest of the plan is concerned, at the time of writing the annual report, 1 audit had seen a final report issued, and officers are in receipt of 4 further draft reports, and we await responses to the recommendations made in those reports. The fieldwork has been completed on 2 other audits, and the draft reports will be issued to officers in due course. And at that point, I will talk about the question about business grants. With you'll notice in the report towards the end, I just outlined there have been instances. The team have been very diligent and have the processes. We've reviewed the processes that were followed to the application process and the actual processing of payments, etc. And we came up with a substantial assurance on that it was the controls in place gave us substantial assurance that the controls were very good. Needless to say, there have been instances where things have payments or cases have been identified. Most of those actually did not lead to payments being made, but there were cases where payments have been made. I would like also to point out that 2 of them were actually national cases. Have been investigated nationally, and the council staff have been assisting the National Investigation Service in supplying information to assist in those investigations. And there were 2 cases, none of which actually were West Devon's, South Hams cases where recovery of payment is taking place. Any cases that have been identified have been reported to our DAX county fraud team, and also the NAFID, which is the National Anti-Fraud Network. Hopefully that answers that. I'm happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Dom. Listen, do you want to follow up that? Because I know there's a couple of other bits to add to that. Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to add a bit around the business grants. I think Councillor Ridges asked the question of who has responsibility for the 33 million in business grants which the council paid out. That is myself as the Section 151 officer. So the information that came through from Bays was very clear that it is the council's chief finance officer that has sole responsibility for the administration of those grants. In order to do that, when the grants were originally announced by Bays, the government department, we set up a project team of who was going to administer the business grants. We also had to complete things like fraud risk assessments, which we had to submit to Bays, who are the government department, and that set out what fraud procedures we had in place. So we use fraud tools such as Spotlight, which does things like you put the details through and it will come back as either red, amber or green. If it's a green, you can pay that business. If it's an amber, you've got to spend more time investigating why. If it's a red, we didn't pay them, and we would do more investigation. But every single one of the business grants that we paid had to go through that very rigorous process. Therefore, we weren't one of the quickest councils to start paying, but we had the procedures in place. And actually, when the league tables came out after the first week or two, we were up there in the top quartile. So we weren't one of the very first, to pay out. We didn't pay any in March, for example, but as soon as early April came, we started paying our business grants. So we don't have our own in-house fraud team. We're not big enough as a district council to warrant that. But this is where us being part of the Devon Audit Partnership really bore fruits last year, I believe. And that's because when we did have cases of fraud, which the team identified, we were able to put them through to the Devon Audit Partnership fraud team for further investigation. And as Mr. Measures has said, some of those were then realised they were national frauds, but spotted by our team, which we were really proud of, I think. Yes, these were things that NAFIN, who are the body around fraud, gave out regular bulletins of things to watch for. So if we could see a pattern that was happening nationally, that when we used to distribute that to our team, and we could do checks on whether we had actually paid any of those, which had again been spotted nationally. Yes, we did get some government grants for administering the business grants. It more than covered our costs. We did pay staff overtime because, to be honest, with the volume that we had to deal with, that was the only way that we could get through the workloads. So we had many staff working evenings, working Saturdays and working Sundays over a period of 2 years, really, to administer those business grants. That has all stopped now. So as of the 31st of March 2022, that was the end of the grant scheme. We are now in the process where Bays contact us and they pick samples of those grants. So we will give them a list of any grant scheme. They will pick a sample, and then we have to respond with all of the checks that we did on an individual business grant. And all of the ones we've submitted so far back to Bays, they've been very happy with the fraud procedures that we have in place. So yes, I also asked Dominic's team in the early days of the grants to do an audit for my reassurance, as I had the responsibility for these grants. And Dominic's team, I think it was on last year's audit plan, but I think you gave the audit opinion of substantial assurance around the business grants. So again, that was a very pleasing result. But yeah, so we are at the end of the business grants, but obviously part of the reason that we haven't been able to progress some of the work on business rates and council tax has been that the team are now administering the £150 council tax rebate.
Of course, yeah.
And actually, for some members of the team, that is probably more work than the business grants. You can imagine the amount that we have to do there, and similarly, we have to do all the same sort of checks. So they all have to go through Spotlight. So yes, the team. It's very good news that we will have the new head of service for business rates and council tax joining us in early September. And when she joins us, I will be meeting with her and we'll be going through some of the things that the internal audits have have highlighted. So we do need to progress work around reliefs and discounts.
Yeah.
That is something that the team just have not had the capacity to do. But we've already had a meeting with Analyse Local. They are a third party that many councils use to do reviews of things like business rate reliefs and discounts. And they're able to, we have to give them all our data, and then they do a checking exercise, and it comes back with things for the team to investigate. So again, that's a big piece of work, but something that I would hope by this time next year that we have, we've done a lot of that work with the assistance of the new head of revenues and benefits.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Ridges, are you happy with that answer? Quite a big answer. Did you want to come back on that thing?
I had a couple of notes. I mean, without sort of asking for too much work on already press department, is there a sort of process that you say you have there's a national system? I'm sure it's based on financial information on business. Is there something that I could have in an email? It's just a few questions have come up by a few parishioners at the meetings. I think it's a really interesting subject. I think it reflects very well on us, and also I think it does lay some concerns out there. But just a paragraph would be great on the process, the audit procedures they went through initially, and subsequently, and that's really been really helpful, very reassuring as well. So I just hope it's works the same with other councils up and down the country. What you read in certain newspapers, it doesn't seem to be so. But there we go. I'll comment there, can we?
No, thank you, Councillor Ridges. It was an excellent question. I had something similar written down, so and it's an important topic, and I think we should give our thanks both to the internal auditors and to our finance team for making it such a robust system. Actually, Vice Chairman, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, it's good that the government do actually pay for the salaries, etc., for the time they get to take up. But I'm always aware that actually in doing that, those members of staff are now doing something that they shouldn't usually be doing. So although they're getting remunerated for it, means the weakness somewhere else, which is part of Dominic's job to pick that up. It's excellent that we've got nothing listed as no assurance. So that's really good news.
Yeah, very good news.
And obviously our aim is to get those 4 items which are listed as limited assurance into reasonable assurance. But I was just thinking about the area of just the council tax really, and also debtors and income collection. It was always difficult, especially with the income collection. That we can actually get more money in quicker. That's owed to us to help us a lot. It's very difficult when we start the year, everything all works out, who's doing what, staff-wise, who's doing what, internal auditing wise. And then the government come along and say, okay, everyone's getting £150 energy rebate. As councillors, we then start getting phone calls saying, hey, I haven't had my money yet. He said, well, check your bank statement. Was it there? Well, I don't pay my direct debit. I pay. Then you fill the form in. What form? And then you realise actually there's a lot more work that goes in. I don't know what percentage of West Devon council type payers actually don't pay my direct debit, but then all those forms then have to be processed and done manually. The rebates made done manually. That takes up time when people are supposed to be doing this income collection. It's taking up time when people are supposed to be doing the income collection. They're now doing processing to take the money from the government and give it back out. So is there a risk? What I'm asking is there a risk that things like debtors and income collection will always take the back seat when the government suddenly come in and say, okay, we're having another fuel allowance because we can't control it. Let's push it back down to the borough councils and the district councils again to sort that out, or city councils. And each time that happens, we're finding that we're pushing for reasonable assurance. We're not getting there. We're staying in limited assurance, and even possibly going back to no assurance because we haven't got time to do it. I just wonder what the risk was of that. If you can answer that.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Yeah, there is a risk. When the government announced everybody's going to have, certain people are going to have £150, saying, oh, that's easy, give them 150 quid. And I sometimes think Whitehall doesn't understand actually the processes that are involved in actually getting the 150 easy. Yes, there will be an impact. You've only got finite resources within the council. So therefore, you've got to take somebody off doing their normal day-to-day job in order to do this, which is much more pressing. And as you say, you know, you're getting phone calls from people saying, I haven't received 150 quid. It's a bit like with the business grants. You know, I must commend that team on how quickly, yes, didn't get anything out on, you know, in March 20, but we made sure that the, you know, process was robust, and then we, you know, put on the pedal, and we got, you know, the team got the payments out. You know, it's that balance between being pressurized by whoever, whether it's the residents or whether it's government, to get payments out, against making sure the controls are in place, but also recognizing that the day-to-day operations will suffer. I'm hoping it won't go down to, you know, no assurance. I don't think it will. The main focus of our findings is around just resources and the knowledge, and so the processes, you know, are sound. I can give reasonable assurance on the processes. It's just the resources to be able to carry out those processes is the concern, which is keeping it down on limited.
That's why we're going to go external.
If I can add to that, Chair, I don't think it's the debt collection which has taken the back seat. I think it has been the review of discounts and release that we haven't been able to progress. So if I go back to 1999, just before the pandemic in 2020, we were, 2019, we were looking at working with Analyse Local through the Devon business rate pool and doing that review of reliefs and discounts. And of course, then the business grants came along in 2020, and we had to put that work on the back burner, really. So for 2 years, we've not been able to progress that work. And that is about writing out to people that may be getting certain discounts and reliefs, either in council tax or business rates, and saying, oh, we noticed that, for example, you're still getting this single person discount, just checking that you're still eligible for that. Can you confirm you're still the sole occupier in that property? So it's those types of regulatory reviews that need to be done in a cyclical manner that we haven't progressed, really. But like I say, that's work that we're hoping to progress in the next 9 months. In terms of debt collection, our sundry debt and our debt collection around things like assets is still looking really good. So I think the audit report we brought to members in February 2022, sundry debt levels were about 280,000. As at the end of May, that's down to 182,000 our sundry debt. So it's back down to the level that we were expecting. I think that figure that we had in February 22 of 280, that was mainly due to a timing difference that we had on whereby we just issued some sundry debt invoices. So though the figure looked higher than normal, it was just that we'd only just issued some of the invoices. Again, if you look at our debts around the assets team, so this is where we might be collecting rent, for example, from some of our estates, that's down to 99,000, which is the lowest we've had for a number of years. I know, commercial rents is flagged in the measures report about having limited assurance, but I think we have done a great deal of work around there. And like I say, that getting that down to below 100,000, that's the lowest it's been for a number of years. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll come to you a second, Vice Chair. No, that's okay. Thank you, Lisa, because you anticipated my next question. So certainly asking that. But I think we had a long discussion last time on this, didn't we? And you know, to see that progress is really good. Vice Chair, you wanted to comment?
I was only going to say, it literally follows on from what I said to Dominic to start with. Really, it's we did have a talk about 2 or 3 years ago. We had a big purge, didn't we? And actually making sure that anyone who had discounts and whatever was still entitled to them. Just the day I was just talking to one of my residents, and he was just having to mention that his circumstances had changed and just telling me about life in general, really. And then I said, well, don't forget to inform the West Edinburgh Council there's no longer just one person living in the house, there's now 4. Oh, I completely forgot about that. So when we do these, I mean, he didn't do it intentionally. It's just the sort of thing, also the first thing you think about when you're training, you get married and that sort of thing. You know, must get in touch with the Borough Council.
Tell them my life's changed.
Worried a bit more.
You might do a good internal auditor maybe, but no, the point is that there must be lots of people who actually, when we contact them through letters or phone or whatever else, it does give them that nudge to say, actually, my circumstances have changed.
Yeah.
So we're not doing that. It's not just a case of reporting behind with income collection. It's also we could be giving people a lot of discounts who aren't entitled to them. And it's not that anyone's being dishonest. It's just that they've got to be reminded now and again that your circumstances have changed. You've got to inform the council. Maybe it's something we should do a press release on or something, or get the comms team to say, just if your circumstances change, make sure you inform the council.
I think that's a really good point, Vice Chair. And last time we did a single person's discount review was in 2019. And that was a joint initiative that we did with Devon County Council, because obviously not only does it benefit us if we do a review of these discounts, it benefits the county council. So we jointly funded a project whereby we wrote out to everyone that was getting single person's discount, like you say, with a form saying, oh, we noticed that you're receiving this discount. Can you just confirm that you are still eligible for it? And like you say, if you receive that letter through your door, it reminds you to think, oh yeah, you know, I've forgotten to inform the Borough Council that my circumstances changed on X date. Yes, but
yeah, I'd love to see us do that again. But my concern is looking at hearing the report. Do we have the man hours to do that? We're still busy processing everything else.
we are going to use a third party such as Analyze Local to do that. So it's a service we have to pay for. But that does help with the resource in that they have got data matching tools that can look at different systems as well, and also flag up to us whereby instances for us